Hi everyone, I'm Jean1. Welcome to my mini instruction on, for adult education, creating a backed table runner. Creating a backed table runner is an example of non-formal instruction. Therefore, participants might receive a certificate, but they wouldn't get any kind of professional accreditation for a course like this. In face-to-face instruction, this instruction would probably take about an hour and a half at most. It would typically be done possibly in a fabric store, maybe in the evenings or during the day possibly. Their target audience would probably be their customers who they want to come in and buy fabrics, so possibly the course wouldn't cost very much. It also might take place in a community center. I know in Lindenhurst, where I live, we have the Rainbow Center, and senior citizens have groups there. The homemakers have a group there. So this would be the kind of instruction, that might be done there. I think the goal of an instruction like this, first of all, is of course to create the table runner, which, by the way, this is a sample. As you can see, it has two sides. The side is the decorator fabric, and this is kind of a cute Snoopy fabric. In the center is something called warm and natural batting. This is a really nice batting. It does tend to be a little bit expensive, but it also is 90 inches wide. So, buying a yard, you're getting 36 by 90. So, it does last. It goes a long way. I believe the target audience for a class like this I think the most common person to attend would probably be a woman. Women probably from about 30 to about 60 or 65. However, I did work in a fabric store, and I do know that men sew. When creating a course description, of course, we would use, everyone, would use gender-neutral language, even though, the majority of the participants would be women. We always want to encourage men and let them feel welcome. And these table runners they make great gifts. And typically they were also made for holidays, so they can, be used for holiday decor. So also wanting to attract a diverse audience, I think that a course description, unless it was really sponsored by a religious organization, would be mentioning the holiday, possibly not Christmas, or maybe they would mention Christmas and Hanukkah and Kwanzaa, just an attempt to be inclusive and really attract a diverse audience. We wouldn't focus on just one holiday. So the steps to make the runner, well, let me just backtrack a bit. I think I mentioned it's face-to-face instruction, and face-to-face would probably take about an hour and a half at most to complete. There really are no prerequisites. I mean, it would help to be able to sew, to operate a sewing machine, but the class would have to take place in a place with sewing machines, and really the only sewing skill that's needed is to be able to sew a straight line, and that's actually taught in the course. So there's really no prerequisite. The course can also, or the project can also be done through a video instruction. So the person could watch a video and probably complete it, within an hour or so. And also the project could be done with a handout. All right, so to begin the project, first, I think I would give an overview to the class and let them know exactly what we're going to do. So I would demonstrate again a couple of samples of the runners and go through the steps, which I think I'll do now. The first step, well, the participants would have to come to the class with two fabrics, and they would also have to come to the class with some warm and natural batting. So the fabrics would have to be the length of the runner. So for this class, we'll imagine we're doing a 60-inch runner. That means the participants will come to the class with two pieces of fabric, two separate pieces of fabric, at least 60 inches. The warm and natural, probably the person could come by a half a yard if they were going to, because it is 90 inches wide, so that would work if you wanted to buy less of it if you weren't going to use it again. So the first step in the class is to cut the fabric. So we have two different fabrics here, and I'm just going to briefly talk about the steps and then go through them. The fabrics will be cut into the size of the runner, which will be approximately 60 inches by about 14.5 or 15 inches wide, as well as the warm and natural batting. The two fabrics then will be put together good side to good side. This is really important. So, good side of the fabric to good side of the fabric, we'll assume they're cut, they're placed together. They're then pinned together, actually no, they're then laid on the warm and natural batting, and they're then pinned to the warm and natural. The next step is to sew around the edge of the runner, probably about 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch in from the edge, leaving approximately a 6-inch opening on one of the longer sides of the runner, one of the 60-inch sides. The step after that is to turn the runner inside out, push out all the edges, and press it. The final step is to do what's called top stitching, which means stitching around the whole edge of the runner and at the same time closing that 6-inch hole, the 6-inch opening, and finally to press the runner. So that's really, in a nutshell, the overview of sewing the runner. It's fairly simple. And what I'll do now is I'll go through the process and kind of highlighting some tips and ways to make sewing a little bit easier along the way. So we go back to cutting the fabric, I should say. So I have my fabric here, and the goal will be, of course, to cut a straight line. Now there is a tip I'm going to share with you, and that is tearing fabric. Cotton fabric, and it's only cotton fabric, can be torn, which means that what I would do is I would cut, we'll assume that this is 60 inches. I would measure in 14.5 inches, and actually this is already measured for me, and I'll make a snip at that 14.5 inch mark. So now I'm going to hold the fabric in both hands, and I'm going to tear the fabric, and this is going to give me a really straight cut, and it's really easy. So I'm going to tear it. So now, rather than cutting my fabric, I just took a quick little shortcut. The edges sometimes are a little messy and a little bit curly, so my next step, and I'm not going to do here, would be to press the fabric so that this edge isn't pulled at all. So again, this only works with cotton fabrics. And just to talk about cottons for a minute, cottons are typically 43 to 45 inches wide. So if I bought a 60-inch piece of fabric, which would be 5 feet, and I wanted to make the runner, what I would do is fold that cotton in thirds. Because again, it's usually 43 to 45 inches wide, and I would measure whatever that third is. So it's probably going to be about 14.5 inches. I would make the snip and then tear the fabric. And I could actually get 3 runners out of 2 60-inch pieces of fabric, because you have your 14 times 3 for the width. Now, if I was using a fabric other than a cotton, it's not possible to tear. So in that case, I'm just going to lay the fabric down, use my yardstick. It's a little tight for space here. I would measure in about 14.5 inches, or again, 1/3 of the width. Make a mark with the pen, and do this periodically along the strip of the fabric. Then I'll turn the yardstick this way. With the pen, I'll draw a line, and I'll proceed to cut the fabric. But I think I'm going to tear it because it's easier. And once again, I'm going to tape. Now we're going to assume that these two pieces of fabric are the same length for our purposes. So the next step is to take the two fabrics and face them together right side to right side, which I'm doing now. Now I'm going to say that I pin them together and lay them on the same size piece of warm and natural batting. Actually, I shouldn't have pinned those two together. I will pin these three together. So if we look at this completed table runner, it has square corners. But one of the nice things I like to do is to kind of edge the corners off, so the completed runner looks something like that. So to do that, I'm going to measure in 3 inches from the corner of the runner at each end, and measuring in on the width. I'll mark it with my pen. And then on the length side, I will measure down 2.5 inches. So I have a mark on the length side, measure down 2.5 inches, and in from the edge 3 inches. So now I'm going to take those 2 marks and draw a line. So when I have the line drawn, now I'm going to just cut that triangle off the edge of the runner. This step would be repeated, obviously, on each corner of the runner. The next step is to sew the runner together and leaving a short opening. So I'm just going to, for our purposes, cut this here. Of course, we would have pinned it. Now I'm going to sew, and I want to talk about sewing a straight line. One of the best things to do to make sure that you actually sew a straight line is to cut a straight line. Because it's really almost impossible to sew a straight line when you haven't cut correctly. So that's something I would have wanted to emphasize earlier. It's just really important to cut a straight line. And of course, with tearing, you'll be fine, and if you take your time measuring, you'll be fine also. So I'm going to start, obviously, on my long side, on the 60-inch side. Of course, the actual runner would have those cuts on each corner. No special sewing machine needed. The sewing machine is probably about 50 years old. As long as it can sew a straight line, it's fine. And the bobbin thread is out. This, of course, should have been done before. So at this point in the process, it's sewing around the entire runner and leaving a short opening, like a 6-inch opening. and see how this works. Of course, you would choose a coordinating thread for the top stitching, but at this point it really doesn't matter what color the thread is. Oh, Jim, I gotta do it all over.
Why?
Because I messed up the thread with me.